It's a beautiful day for a walk in the garden. I'm Liz Davey, and this is A Walk in the Garden. And it's being filmed by NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television, right here in Norfolk, at my home in Norfolk, and in my gardens and in my kitchen. I'm standing in the herb garden where I usually start this series of programs, and things have really popped up. We've had a lot of rain. It's been a little cool, but today it is a beautiful day and the temperature is supposed to go up to 70. Probably won't last, and I think more rain is in the forecast. So we need to get out here and do some gardening today while it's a beautiful day to be outside. Everything's coming up in the herb garden, and we can really pick a number of things. Chives, of course, they're starting to set buds, but you can still pick the leaves. Avoid eating the bloom stalks, they're a little tough. Sweet woodruff is up and starting to bloom. That's the herb that can be used in May wine. It's a lovely ground cover for a shady area. Mint is up, and you can pinch a little of the mint here and there. It will actually make it bush out a little better. But the main thing to do in the garden now is to prune things and to plant things. Planting takes priority. I do want to mention this is an herb called rue. It is not a culinary herb, at least it isn't these days. Maybe in the Dark Ages they did use it for a medicinal plant. But it is a problem if you have skin sensitivities. You have to be very careful working in the sun and working around this plant. Be sure to wear gloves and cover up your arms, or you can get a very nasty rash from it. It has what they call phototoxicity. It makes, if it gets on your skin, it makes the sun burn a little more. But today I'm going to do the planting of some rosemary. And this is a rosemary cutting that I took. If you've watched the shows before, I took this cutting of rosemary last August. And I've grown it on. And today I'm going to plant it out into the herb garden. And I want to get the roots out and carefully put it in. And as with anything you plant now, even though it's been raining pretty much constantly and predicted to have a little more, you still need to water the plants in. This removes some of the air pockets that are around the roots and really makes a difference. I've tried it without it when I thought rain was going to be there soon, and it doesn't always work out very well. So it's wise to just have a watering can and add some water to every plant that you plant. This garden will be shaded afternoon a little bit. It won't be in full sun, but new plants can use a little shelter from the sun after you put them in if it's a really blisteringly sunny day. Now let's move over to the perennial garden. It's time to start looking for those nasty red lily beetles, and you can just see them on your lilies if you have lilies that have come up, and there's one right there. And the idea is to squash them. If you're squeamish about squashing them, have a jar of soapy water to put them in. You don't want them on your lilies. They'll eat a little now as these red beetles, and they're easier to find now too. They are kind of under the leaves. But if you are diligent, you can have lilies, even though they are around. It's the larva of the beetle after it lays the eggs that you really need to be fearful of, because they will completely defoliate lilies. And they will actually kill them eventually after they've eaten all the foliage for several years. They'll probably come up again a second year, but it's worth it if you like lilies and want them to keep watch of them for the beetles about now. And it doesn't take long just to go through and check and see if there is one and get rid of it. Plants are, some of them have finished the blooming, the bulbs. These were daffodils that were in bloom. The later daffodils are now in bloom. Once the plants have finished blooming, I'm going to add a little of the all-purpose fertilizer around them. And with this, I will wait for the rain to do its job. This is the time to fertilize them, actually, rather than earlier in the spring and in the fall. Because what's happening now is the sun is providing the necessary energy for them to build up their bulb for fall and next spring's bloom. By fall, you want the nice bulb down there ready to spring forth next spring and bloom. So it's time for the hyacinths that are past and all of the daffodils to just add a little bit of extra fertilizer if you choose to do so. It does help. These are later tulips. This is Angelique, and this is a later daffodil that I like very much. It's sturdy, even though it's small. It's very prolific blooms on it. Some of the later ones, tulips and daffodils, are very charming. They're a little smaller sometimes, but they are very pretty. Later tulips are in bloom, and I'm going to plant a tulip, and this is one that was a gift for Easter, and you can see it's gone by pretty well. But I'll plant it in here. I may not get any blooms next year, but the year after I may. I want to get it as deep as I can and just plant it in. And I'll bring that watering can over and water it a little later. It's a good idea to take some pictures of your bulb garden now, because in a while that foliage will be browning off. You want to leave the foliage. Don't cut it down or even braid it. Leave it to provide the energy to those bulbs underneath. But if you wait until fall bulb planting time, unless you've marked your bulbs or taken pictures, you won't know where they are. And you may plant bulbs over bulbs that are already there or in places that you really don't want them. So I like to get out here with the camera and take a lot of pictures in the spring so that I can know where everything is when they're gone. It's very easy to overplant, and I've done it. I've planted things on top of other things, and sometimes they come up and work out. Again, I have more lilies here, and I'll just check those on the way through. Doesn't take long, and I'm going through, and each time the bulbs finish blooming, I'll take off a bloom, and just the bloom, I'll leave the stalk, and then we'll let them brown out. I am going to go back over here and trim. This is a butterfly bush, and you don't trim them in the fall. You wait until spring, and I can see new growth, and then we cut it down to the ground. And you can see how much growth it put on last year, and I anticipate that it will do the same this year. I have another one that's already been cut down, and these can just be added to the burn pile later on. Supporting plants is a issue right now, and you'll see I have a lot of little cages around things. This is to prevent them from sprawling all over. I kind of like them to stand up and so we can see the blooms. And one of the things I do is use a bolt cutter and old tomato cages and just snip them. And I now have 2 plant supports instead of 1. Actually, had I wanted another low one, I could have gotten 3. It's an easy task and it does help. I'll put this one around a Montauk daisy that's here, and that will keep it from sprawling out too much. Let's move down the way again and come to a rose bush, and it's early May and time to feed the roses. And I want to put about a cup around each mature rose bush. And we'll do this 3 times a season. Now, and when it's had its first flush of bloom, and then again in about August. I'll work this into the soil around the rose and then water it well. Again, I'll bring my watering can over and finish the watering. I've planted a primrose here that again was inside. And that seems to be doing well. It's almost out of bloom and we can cut those blooms off soon. But the primrose itself should come back another year. It's one of the things you can buy as a house plant and plant outside and have it come back. More tulips down this way. These are some new ones that turned out pretty well. It's Mango Charm. And they have kind of pink and yellow and mango colors. They go very nicely with the light jonquil that they're next to, I think. The peonies are up and budded. This one is a red one that will be blooming in another month. And I've put a support around it, again, so that it doesn't flop with the weight of the flowers. I've put up my hummingbird feeder, and you'll notice I don't have red liquid in it. They don't need, or is it beneficial to put red liquid in for the hummingbirds. They will come. This is sugar and water, 2 cups of water to a 1/2 cup of sugar. I bring that to a boil and then let it cool and then add it to my hummingbird feeder. And I've been quite successful at getting hummingbirds. They usually come back around the first week in May, so we should expect to see some quite soon along the way. Now let's head over to the vegetable garden. It's time to do a lot of planting there. Almost all of the plants that I planted in the milk jugs in January and February have germinated, and I have a lot of little seedlings to be planted. I've taken the lids back, undone the tape, and opened them up because it's a sunny day and they can use the sun, and now the plants are a little bigger. There are a few that didn't germinate, but that's just a chance you take as a gardener. It's always good to experiment, but some of the seeds possibly were old or didn't come up. But I do have plenty to plant in both vegetables and flowers, so that will be a task that will be taking place in the next couple of weeks, to either get them into small pots or into the garden. But today I'm going to plant some things that I started inside or purchased. And the first will be some lettuce. And this I started out in my little sun shed, and I have 6 little lettuce plants, and these are lettuce red sails. I'm going to put the little tag in, and I've used my string to mark the row. But at this point, and then I've used a hoe to come along and mark it so that I have a mark where I can put these, that they'll be in a reasonably straight area. And I want to put them out about 4 to 6 inches apart. And I'll just do a few. They have good roots, and they tend to get a little tangled. want to plant these at about the same level they were growing. And again, I'll water as I plant. I'll finish the others a little later. The next thing I want to plant is celery. And I purchased this at the garden center, and it is probably fairly root bound by now because I got it a little while back. And again, we'll plant it the same way. We lost a few lettuce leaves. And pull off the string. I'll probably put the string in further down. And make 3 spots. Celery does grow here surprisingly well. If it's a moist year or you keep it watered well, it does like water. But it's always worth a try, and it tastes so much better than what you buy at the store. These are pretty dry, so I'm going to give them a little water before I put the dirt back around them. And this is a discolored stem, and I'll just take that off and discard it. And I throw the rocks up to the edge. We do have rocks in Norfolk. And again, give them each a nice drink. The next thing I'm going to plant is from one of the milk jugs. And this is fennel. And this is the bobbing fennel, which I've never grown before, but I thought I'd like to try it. And I need to work it out of the milk carton. And you can see I have a lot of nice roots in there. And then we need to carefully separate the plants out. And this forms a bulb, so it may get a little larger. I'm going to give it at least a 6-inch border here. And I just put a few in my pot, so I think I have 6 little plants. Dividing them is somewhat difficult. That one I think I lost. No, I have it. And again, I need to take the string off. Don't need too much of a hole for these. Actually, there's 2 in this one. So I will separate out one of them. And there are 2 here as well. When you plant, you try to separate the seeds, but it doesn't always work out. So we have a few more than I thought we did. With these bare roots, we definitely can't wait to put them in a little later. They have to go in right now. They may not all take. Again, that's gardening. Not every plant will grow, especially when you put them in so tiny. But I will be careful to water them. If it's dry. And if we do have some cool, damp weather, I think they probably will take well. I can also start planting seeds anytime, and I have some perpetual spinach seeds here. It's a chard type plant, and I'm going to plant it right here. One thing I cannot do with gloves is plant seeds. So these are fairly large seeds. Let me get some grass out of here. I'll try to space it out a little bit. I'm planting this in with the old parsley. This parsley is going to go to seed and then die eventually. So I thought I'd just plant a little of the spinach right near it. And I will put on my gloves to smooth the soil over it. Again, I want to cover the seeds by about 3 times their size. And they aren't too big, so it doesn't take much. And then I'll pack it down well. I would probably dislodge these if I attempted to water it now, so I'll just let the rain do it, hopefully gently. And we should see these up in about a week or 2. I will probably plant more a little later, so we'll have a crop that goes on for a couple harvestings at least. You can see on my clipboard that I've planned out my garden, and it's a simple plan. It's nothing extravagant or artistic. I've just marked rows on my notebook paper and decided where I want to put different plants. It helps so that I can fit everything in, which I always have more seeds than I have garden space, it seems, at least to give them proper spacing. I've also put in my tomato cages, but I won't put in my tomatoes until at least Memorial Day, probably even a little later than that. I won't plant my cucumbers, which will go on the teepee in the middle, or my summer squash, which will go at the end of this row, until that time. They like the soil to be warm, and if you put tomatoes into cold soil, or peppers or eggplant, they just sit there. They don't start growing again until it gets warm, and it really sets them back rather than giving them a head start. So I have my plans, I have my strings up. I can start planting many of the crops. Beans can be done in about a week. They, again, like it a little warmer, but they'll be okay in probably a week. Carrots, lettuce, cabbage, broccoli, all of those can go in now because they don't mind even if there's a tiny frost. And I understand that the Cape had a little frost last night, so we aren't out of the woods quite yet. We still could get a light frost. So you don't want to put out any of your tender flowers or tender plants in the garden unless you are planning to come out and cover them up if frost is predicted. You'll really have to watch the weather carefully if you decide to put your things in the garden now. I prefer to wait and then be sure that it's not going to get too cold. I'm ready to put up my pea fence down at the end. I've got the stakes in. They need a little more pounding, and then I'll put a fence there because the peas are growing quite well. They're one of the crops that likes the cool weather. I also have radishes up and spinach, and they're fine in cool weather. In fact, they won't be happy if it gets too hot. So we keep going with it. I've also added more fluff to my little cage that's on the trellis for the birds. They've been taking what I put in earlier to make nesting material. And I put in the fluff that I saved from the Monarda, or I'm sorry, not Monarda, butterfly weed seeds that I saved. They all have that fluff, the little airplane fluff on them, and I saved the fluff and I put it in, and the birds took it immediately. Now I have gone to dryer lint, and hopefully they will find that as attractive for their nesting material. You can also put out pieces of string or yarn. It's kind of fun when you find a nest in the fall to see what's in it and if they've used some of the materials that they've collected from your house. Now, let's go back and see what's happening in back. I've had the pansies and little lettuce, red lettuce, in my window boxes for a month or so, and it brightened them up a little, but it's time to start adding some other things. And today I'm going to add an alyssum plant. And alyssum can take a little cold weather if that comes. And this is one, it's called Frosty Knight. Knight spelled with a K, like the medieval warrior. And I planted it last year and I loved it because it has a variegated leaf, and it also did not die out in the heat. It bloomed all summer nicely. And again, this is kind of dry, so I want to be sure and water it. These window boxes are pretty small, and they do require a lot of water. If I were putting up new window boxes, I think I would put up deeper ones. But at this point, I'm not going to change them. But I do have to remember to get in and water them. And I have one for my other window box as well. I also use for night viewing, I've got a solar light in each of my window boxes. I replace them fairly often. I buy the inexpensive ones, but it's kind of nice to have a little light here at night. This is the side of my garage going around to the backyard, so it's nice to have just some little lights in the evening, and they work quite well. They get a lot of sun during the day, so they do provide solar view. Now we'll head out to the backyard. Again, keeping busy. This is a narrow little area going back towards my pond, and the plant here in bloom is Brunera. It has a little blue flower that's very pretty. It looks like forget-me-nots, and in fact, some people do call it forget-me-not, though it is not a true forget-me-not. It has heart-shaped leaves. It also comes in variegated variety, which has kind of white mottling on the leaves. This is just the standard one, and it grows very well. In fact, I've been able to separate some out for our garden club sale, which is coming up on the 18th of May on the town hill. All the garden club members have been busy when they could get outside and potting up plants to be shared at the sale. This one is a Japanese fern, and it has a nice color to it. They also come in a green and several other Japanese painted fern, and some of them have more of a white mottling on them as well. A lot of hosta. I have quite a few, and it's time again to, some of these have wandered over into the little waterway I have here, the dry stream. It is not too dry when it rains because it helps the water flow down to this area. But some have drifted over, so those can be dug and potted up and shared with others, or planted someplace else in my yard. Things are really popping here. Again, a lot of Brunera and bleeding heart. These will also reseed, and you may, if you look around, find a seedling of a bleeding heart. This one came from another one that I have in my yard. I found a seedling, and they replant quite easily. They're perennial. This is epimedium, and hopefully you can see these pretty little flowers. It's a plant I love. It's a ground cover, very slow growing one at that, but it is a ground cover type plant. It has attractive heart-shaped leaves and these beautiful little fairy flowers, I call them, because they're just tiny little interesting flowers. And they come in several colors: yellows, purples, pinks, and whites. I have them scattered here and there. This one is in bloom now. Some of the others were in bloom earlier, and some will be in bloom a little later. They're just a lovely little plant, and they're not too easy to find, but if you see them, they're worth picking up because they really are perennial, and they come back every year and get even better. The hellebores are still blooming away, and hosta are coming up. I have some in here amongst the crocuses. This is all crocus foliage that they've bloomed, and now they're building their bulbs for next year. But the hosta are coming up in between, so I've been out here with my little slug pellets, iron phosphate, which is safe for pets and children. I wouldn't want either of them to eat it, but it's not as dangerous as the metaldehyde, which is extremely poison, that's often used for slugs and snails. I don't use that, and I don't recommend it. It's just too dangerous. But the iron phosphate does work as long as you keep putting it on. Thought I'd show you how I go about getting my pond set for summer. It's a little late, but the weather has not been conducive to getting out here and getting wet, which I usually do when I'm doing this. The first step I'm going to do is to put the pump in, and the fish are still in here. They'll stay in here as I do my work. They may be curious, and this is just a cellar drainer pump, and I put that in, and then I will plug it in and turn it on, and we have some water coming out already. And I will drain out maybe 6 or 8 inches of water, just a bit of water, enough that I can get in and work on some of the other things. I've put the waterfall in, I've set it in, but I haven't put it in yet, and that will stay there. This is a skimmer which will take in water, and it will hold a filter and a basket, and this will help get out any leaves and blossoms and other things that fall into the pond. The filter media, which is biological media, this picks up the beneficial bacteria to help clean the water. There are little plastic balls in here, if I can get it open. And this is washed out and slightly and dried each fall. I guess it's not going to open that easily, but they're little plastic balls with lots of little spines on them that will hold on to the bacteria, and that will go in under the waterfall. This will go at this point and be attached so that the water can flow in. Out of this side will come a small hose which will attach to my pump, and the pump has been in water all winter inside. This keeps the seals from drying out, supposedly, and we hope the pump will continue to work. You can't really tell until you start it up. And then out of the top of the pump, the water will come into the bottom of it, and out of this top area, we'll attach a long hose that will go all the way around the pond under the deck and fasten to the waterfall. This allows the water to be fed in through the skimmer and cleared of any debris, goes next to the pump, and the pump will then pump it up through the waterfall and back into the pond. So it's a closed system. It just keeps recirculating, and this is what will clean the water, along with some beneficial bacteria and maybe a little skimming by hand if anything big falls in. It's too early to put in tender pond plants, but you can buy them and keep them ready and have them inside in a warm place until the weather is settled and the water is warm. The fish are just as happy whether the water is cold or warm. They're more active when it's warm because the water is warmer, and they do need feeding, so I've been feeding them about once a day. When it gets hot, I'll feed them twice a day because they'll need it. They'll be very active at that point. I usually don't have baby fish because I don't have much in the way of vegetation on the bottom of the pond. If I put a lot of plants in the bottom, I might expect to get some little fish. But it's easier to clean without a lot on the bottom, so I've not put them there. I've put my plants around the edge. I will have frogs, and I've even seen a painted turtle occasionally. I didn't put them in, but they tend to show up. So it's kind of fun to watch what comes to the pond. What I don't want is the blue heron, and you see I've moved my blue heron. He's fake, and hopefully he will fool the real ones so that they won't come and eat the fish, and they will think that this is his territory. We're hopeful. We've lost fish before, so. He will keep moving around as the summer goes on. You'll see him in different spots around the pond, because if he stayed in one spot, they'd probably catch on that he wasn't real. So we're going to try to fool him. This plant is called Regerzia, and it's one I like. I've had trouble growing it before, and it needs some water, so hopefully this area will spur me to remember to water it, and I can keep it watered. Other plants are coming up: stilbe, ferns, more hosta, ginger, European ginger, which is another nice ground cover that doesn't spread out too fast. I have a lot of ground covers, and I do like them, but sometimes they become a little too much and I have to pull some of them out. The mertensia is blooming over here, and hopefully the camera can catch a glimpse of that a little later, because it's really in full bloom. It comes and then it goes. So we have a few things like that. Trees are starting to leaf out. There's just a lot of things to do. My shed is full of plants that are waiting to come outside, and they just need a little more growing. I've also started a number of marigolds right in the shed. I put potting soil into some 6-packs and planted marigold seeds. And again, those should grow fairly fast and be ready to go in the garden in another month. Now let's head up to the house and into the kitchen and see what we can cook up with some of the herbs that we've been able to harvest. Today I'm going to use a few herbs from the garden and make a breakfast or brunch. Could be for Mother's Day, or maybe just a nice day and you'd like to take it out and eat on the patio. So the first thing I'm going to start with are some scones, and I'm going to make cheddar cheese and chive scones. And I have 2 cups of flour. Into that I'm going to add a ½ teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of baking powder, and mix that in. And then 6 tablespoons of cold butter I'll put right in, and we want to cut that in. And one of the easiest ways of doing it, and the recipe from King Arthur even recommends just using your fingertips to mix it in to make crumbs. The idea is to have the butter distributed in small pieces through the flour. You can use a pastry blender or a fork or your fingers. I did wash after being in the garden, of course. A scone is really a fancy biscuit. Usually has a little more fat, a little more sugar sometimes, or other things in it. Now I need to wash off. Now we'll toss in some shredded cheddar cheese, 1 cup of grated or shredded, and about a 1/4 cup of chopped chives. Chives are at their peak right now out in the garden, so it's nice to find some way to use it. Now I will use the fork and just kind of toss this together. You want the cheese nicely distributed, and also the chives. This is more of a savory scone. I'll break 2 eggs into 1/3 of a cup of cream. And I'm going to blend this well with the fork. And then stir it into the flour mixture. Just want to get everything moist. Most all the flour has been moistened. I'm going to put it out onto a floured cloth. And we'll still need to knead it together a little bit. Until it holds together. And then I just want to pat this out or roll it, and I think I will roll it. And I'd like it to be about 10 inches by 2 inches. And I think that's about there. And I'm going to cut it into 5 pieces. And I'll square these up a little bit, pat them down, and cut them diagonally. And put them on a paper-lined sheet. You could use a cookie cutter if you wanted to, a round or a square. I do need to leave some space between them because they will puff up. And then we're going to put these in a 325-degree oven for about 20 minutes. So our scones are in the oven. Next, I want to make some sausage. And I'm using ground pork, and we'll add some things to that to turn it into sausage. If you make your own sausage from ground pork, obviously you can also grind your own meat, but I don't do that. I buy the ground pork or turkey and then add to it. You can control the amount of salt, which is one thing that's somewhat important. And I'm using in this half an apple, which I'm shredding into the sausage meat. Then I want to add about a half a tablespoon of maple syrup. This will give it a maple flavor. About half a teaspoon of salt, and half a tablespoon, I'm looking at my recipe here to remember, it's a teaspoon of minced sage and half a tablespoon of thyme. And these are both from the herb garden. And then we mix that all together, and that will be our pork sausage. And the next step will be to fry it. And I've just put a little cooking spray in the pan, and I'm going to add these patties to it. I've turned it on. We just want to cook them through. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do, we'll have sausage and the scones and an omelet. And I'm going to use 2 eggs for my omelet. And beat in a tablespoon and a half of milk. Can be approximate. And I'm also going to add some salt, a few shakes, and just a pinch of curry powder. It's something I happen to like with my eggs. and it makes a very good omelet. And then I'm going to combine these well. And then add them to my frying pan where I've melted a tablespoon of butter. And put it over kind of medium heat. And we'll just let it sit for a little bit. And it will start to set. Now some people will try to use the flipper and flip the whole thing once the bottom has set. I have another way of doing it that works better for me and gives me a better end result. And when it starts to set around the edges, I start pulling in the cooked part from the edge to the center with the spatula. And I'll just keep doing this until the whole thing is set. And just keep going around and pulling it in and bringing the uncooked egg to the outside, tipping the pan a little if necessary. It sets up fairly fast on the bottom. We want all the uncooked egg to get set. And keep pulling it in. A little more here to come around. Now when most of the omelet is set, I'm going to sprinkle it with some cheese. This is cheddar cheese. It's cut in little cubes. And I'll turn off the heat. It will stay a little warm. I'm also going to put on a few mushrooms down the middle. You could use spinach or anything else you want to use as your filling for your omelet. And then I'm going to put a plate over this for about 5 minutes. And that will cook the top of the omelet and melt the cheese. So we'll let that set for 5 minutes. In the meantime, our sausage is finished. We can check its temperature. Ground meat should be cooked to 165, whether it's hamburger, ground turkey, ground chicken. And this is now well over that temperature. I like to use a thermometer when I cook meat. It's very handy to have. And this is an instant read, so you get a quick reading on your meat. So we know that this is finished, and our scones should be just about ready to take out of the oven too. They have just a few more minutes. The scones are ready to come out of the oven. Our sausage is cooked, and the omelet should be just about ready to fold. So we're going to put this together on a plate. And first thing we'll add is a piece of sausage. And then we want to try to fold our omelet, which should be just about right. Our cheese looks nice and melty. And I'm going to go around the edge of this. And then fold it in half. And slip it right onto the plate. Much easier than trying to turn it. Then we'll add one of the scones. and a little piece of parsley, just for a nice garnish. We have that in the garden too. And I'm going to put it all on a tray so we can take it outside, or maybe have breakfast in bed, or serve somebody else breakfast in bed. And we'll add a few things just to make the tray look pretty. And that would be a little bouquet of flowers that smell good. And a little bowl of strawberries, garnished with a little of the mint from the garden. This is an orange mint. And there we have a breakfast that you can take out, have on the patio, or perhaps even serve it to somebody as breakfast in bed, maybe on Mother's Day. Thank you for joining me. You've been watching A Walk in the Garden with Liz Davey, and this has been filmed by NCTV, Norfolk Community Cable Television. Join us again next time as we walk in the garden and cook in the kitchen.